I'm ready to start on another lighthouse for my brother Jerry, and I'm going to try to go into a little bit more detail on how I built it. So here's my sketch. We're going to start out with a 5-inch maple base, then we're going to have 17 segment rings, and each segment's going to have 16 pieces. And we're going to have this piece here is going to be solid maple, and the top's going to be solid maple. So I've got a cut list over here for all the segment rings, how long each piece needs to be. So first thing we want to do is cut some maple strips. I added up all my cut lengths, and we need 261 inches of maple. So let's get to cutting. So this will be the wood for the segments, and in between each row we're going to have a grout line of purple heart. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to glue a piece of purple heart to the side of these, and then run them through the saw and leave only about a 3/32 of an inch for the grout line. So we'll slice up some purple heart now and get some of these glued up, and we'll work on something else while that's drying. Alright, I've got 3 of those glued up. Now we've got to let those dry for probably 3 or 4 hours before we can do anything else to them. In the meantime, that's going to be the grout line in between each segment ring. Now the segment ring itself is going to have grout lines this way, so there's going to be a small block in between each segment, and there's 17 segments and 17 rings, 16 segments to a ring. So we're going to have to cut a small 3/32 thick piece to go in between each segment. So we'll get ready to do that now. Here's how we're going to set up to cut these small pieces. We've got this adjustable stop here. We're going to take one of our pieces from the last lighthouse, just touch that up against it, tighten this down. I've got 12 of these cut now, so now we need to cut them into 1-inch pieces, and we're going to do that on the bandsaw because it's a little less exciting than trying to do it on the table saw. We have 3 pieces now ready to be cut into segments. And what we're going to do now is take these pieces that we cut off and glue those to 3 more pieces and repeat that process until we have all of these done. I've got 3 more of these glued up, so while we're waiting on them to dry, we'll start cutting out our bottom base and the top 2 pieces. What we're going to do now is take our 5-inch base and glue it to this waste block so we can put a recess on the back of it to be able to mount it to the chuck when we start gluing our rings to it later. Now that all my strips are glued together and cut down, it's time to start making some segments. And the way we're going to do that is this sled that I made. You can buy these triangles, which this one's for 16 segments. It has the right angle already on it. You slide it in here, adjust your fences up to where it's good and tight, and then that'll give you a perfect angle to do 16 segment ring. So what we'll do next is adjust this to the length of the segment I need. I've got a spreadsheet that gives me the length of the segments for each ring depending on which diameter of the ring I want. So let's start cutting some segments. Ring 1 is 1 inch, so I'm going to adjust this out till I get 1 inch. Tighten this down. So there's 16 segments, and we'll sand them and get the burrs off before we glue them up. I'm just going to test fit one. And 272 cuts later, all the segments are cut. Now I've got to sand all the burrs off of them, and then I'll be ready to start gluing up the rings. All 17 rings are dry now. Now we have to sand each side flat, and to do that we're going to use a homemade flatness sander that I made from my original lathe that I bought. I turned down a 4x4 in there and wrapped it with sandpaper and made myself a drum sander. So we're going to get set up and we'll sand all these rings flat, then we'll be ready to glue them together on the lathe. Now we're going to start gluing the rings on to the base, and we're going to use this called a cold jaw. It does a really good job of holding this piece. So let's put it in here and clamp down on it just a little bit. Doesn't have to be tight. Now that holds that ring pretty much perfectly centered, so we don't have to worry about lining it up. Well, the glue has dried overnight, so what we're going to do now is turn it down and get it all round. And then I'll come back with my calipers. I know what each ring diameter needs to be, so then we'll turn each ring down to get the right slope. Then we'll take a straight edge and knock out any high spots that we have. Then we'll be ready to sand it and put some sanding sealer on it. Now we're going to clean it off with some denatured alcohol, get the dust off before we do the sanding sealer. Okay, we've got our steady rest here, which is a homemade rig I made with speed skate wheels to hold it steady while we've got the tailstock out. So what we're going to do now is mark and drill our holes for our handrail. Then we've got to drill the hole in the end for the light to go in. This is the LED light that's going to go in the lighthouse. So we're going to drill a hole with this Forstner bit for this driver to go inside and for this section to go inside, and then we'll turn a little bit deeper recess so this will be countersunk down into the base. So here is some exclusive behind the scenes footage of how I do the ocean scene behind the lighthouse. So I've got a green screen hanging in my shop. So then I take my phone and just shoot a video with the green screen in the background.